Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to the segment of Khoj Gurbani's a-sabad-a-day. The recitation is from Rag Gauri Ashtpadiyan, Mahalla Pehla, composition of Nanak in Rag Gauri, subsection Gwareri. Ik oankar Satnam Karta Purakh Gur Prasad. Oneness, that is existence and consciousness, the creator, personality, the enlightener, and grace. Nidh Sidh Nirmal Naam Bichar, Puran Pur Rahya Bikhamar, Trikuti Chuti Bimal Majhar, गुर की मत जी आई कार इन बिद राम रमत मन मान्या ज्ञान अंजन गुर शब्द पछान्या रहाओ इक सुख मान्या सहज मिलाया निर्मल बाणी परम चुकाया लाल भय सूहा रंग माया नदर भई बिख ठाक रहाया उलट भई जीवत मर जाग्या शब्द रवे मन हर्स्यों लाग्या रस संग्रह बिख पर हर त्याग्या पाए बसे जम का पौ भाग्या साध रहे बंधन अहंकारा चित हर्स्यों राता हुक्म अपारा जात रहे पत के आचारा दृष्ट भई सुख आत्म तारा तुझ बिन कोय न देखयो मीत किस सेवो किस देवो चीत किस पूछो किस लागो पाए किस उपदेश रहा लिवलाए गुर सेवी गुर लागो पाए भगत करी राचो हर नाए सिखया सिखया दीखया भोजन पाओ हुक्म संजोगी निज घर जाओ गर्भ गंतन सुख आत्म ध्याना जोत बही ज्योति माहे समाना लिखत मिटे नहीं शब्द निशाना करता करना करता जाना नह पंडित नह चतुर सियाणा नह भूलो नह परम पुलाणा कथो न कथनी हुक्म पछाणा नानक गुरमत सहज समाणा नह पंडित नह चतुर सियाणा नह भूलो नह परम बुलाणा कथो न कथनी हुक्म पछाणा नानक गुरमत सहज समाणा. This is an Ashtpadi, 8-versed composition of the first Nanak, in which he's explaining to us, as he says in the Rahau Pankti, in bid Ram Ramat Man Manya. Through this method is the mind persuaded. Gyan Anjan Gur Sabad Pachanya. The Sabad of Gur wisdom is the collyrium of knowledge that opens the mind's eye. And that is how the all-pervasive self is experienced within, Pachanya. And he sums up his own experience in the very first verse. He says, Nidh Sidh Nirmal Naam Bichar. Nidh Sidh Nirmal Naam Bichar. Self-knowledge contains the 9 treasures and the 18 powers, occult powers. This is what all practitioners of the spiritual kind in India were were aiming for. This is the ultimate goal, so to speak, the 18 powers and the 9 treasures. We can't go into an explanation of these. It's a fairly long Shabad, but that's basically the goal of all spiritual practice, especially the tantrics and the siddhas. So the Guru says, Naam, self-knowledge, Naam Bichar, reflection on self-knowledge, contains all of this. And Naam Bichar is Nirmal. It is the purifying solvent for the mind. And you obtain self-knowledge through reflection and contemplation. That is how Nanak says he broke through his toxic ego consciousness and became aware of cosmic awareness. Puran pura reha bik mar biknu marke, the toxic existence of the ego. And he goes on to talk about ik sukha manya sehaj milaya, the purifying effect of the Sabad. Nirmal Bani param chukaya. Bani, the Sabad, the message of the Guru, is Nirmal. It's purifying. He's already talked about the purifying solvent. Sabad, Naam are overlapping ideas. Actually, they're the same thing, just functionally different sometimes, and so they overlap. So the Guru says the purifying effect of the word Nirmal Bani cures the mind of its self-deception, paramachukaya, because that is the problem with the mind, self-deception. And because it deceives itself, it engages in toxic behavior. So, Ik sukh manya sehaj milaya nirmal bani param chukaya lal bhay suha rang maya nadar bhay bik thak rahaya. Grace dawns upon the mind, and the intense fire of love for the self burns all egoic attachments. And then with natural ease, the ecstasy of union with the self is enjoyed. Ulat bhahi jivat mar jagya. Ulat bhahi. This is a reversal, a complete reversal of the mind. The mind is now topsy-turvy. It is free from the fear of death. Bhai base jamko bhav pagya. And more importantly, it brings this union with the self, brings forth the elixir of virtues and replaces the toxicity of the ego. Ras sangrah bikh par har tyagya. Ras sangrah. Ras, the virtue, the elixir of virtue springs within the mind. So you see, virtues are reflections of the self in your persona, and they have to be produced. They are like offspring. You have to engage with Naam to cultivate these virtues. And that is how the mind reverses itself. Ulatabahi. It understands its true nature. So in a sense, the mind is topsy-turvy right now and has to be looking in the right direction. Sad rahe band ahankara chit harsyo rata hukam apara jaat rahe pat se achara drisht bhai sukh atam tara. And see what impact it has on Guru Nanak, on this experience. He says, the mind is now filled with love of the Har Self, Chitta Harsyo Rata, and it is unshackled from the whims of the ego consciousness. Sad rahe badan ahankara, unshackled, and now lives in consonance with boundless cosmic order, hukam apara. So, Chitta Harsyo Rata, Hukam apara. It has come into consonance with hukam. Gone is the desire to act out of concern for obtaining respect. We all do things because we have expectations, but the Guru is saying, Jat rahe patake achara. I don't do anything with expectation of being honored or getting respect from others. Because Drisht bhai sukh atam tara, because the eye of grace is upon me, I enjoy the bliss of the self. Sukh atam tara. And then the Guru asks the question. He says, apart from you, tuj bin, I see no friend. Koi na dekho mit. Who else can one then give one's heart to? And who else can one serve? Kis sevon, kis devon chit. Who can one go to for guidance? And who can one go to for shelter? Kis pucho, kis lagon paye. And whose message should I listen to that can help me unite with the self? Kis upadesa raha liblai. This is another way of saying, because I see no friend other than you, O self, that is where I have to turn to. So ultimately, our inner self is the guide. Our inner self is the wisdom that we have to listen to. We have to learn how to tap into it through Guru wisdom. That's the key. And that is what Guruji is saying. He says, speaking in first person, by placing myself at the feet of the Guru Enlightener, I remain in servitude. Gur Seni, Gur Lagon Pai. And then with devotion and love, I soak the mind with self-knowledge. Bhagat kari racho haranai. It's literally like soaking a sponge. And then the guidance and the instruction of the Guru Enlightener, he says, are nourishing. Sikhya, Dikhya, Pojan. And they inspire love. Pao. And they bring me in accord with Hukam. Hukam Sanjogi. And thus, I return to my source, Nij kar jao. So the source is within us. That is where we have to return, and we have to place ourselves and in servitude to the Guru, to Gur. The Gur is a technique, method, knowledge, however you want to look at it. And then the joy of self is experienced when self-pride is given up, and the attention is fixed on the self. Garab gantang sukh atam tyana. And then the message of the sabad is indelible, and it's enshrined in the heart. Likhat mite nahi. It's indelible. Sabad nisana. It's enshrined. And when the flame of knowledge of the self is merged with the mind, Jyot bhai jyoti mahe samana, then the realization dawns. And what is that realization? There is only one actor who is the ultimate cause and the ultimate effect. Karta, Karana, Karta, Janna. And in conclusion, Nanak says, Nanak is not learned. I am not learned, he says. I am not clever, nor am I wise. Naha pandata, naha chatur syana. But I have experienced the bliss of Sahaj, which is the goal of Sikhi. I have experienced that bliss, he says, by becoming one with the self, with my inner self. Nanak gurbat Sahaj samanna. Now, Nanak's mind is free of self-deceptive forgetfulness. Naha pulo nah parama pulanna. Now Nanak does not speak about nor attempt to describe hukam. Katho na kathani. Instead, he recognizes intimations from hukam. In other words, he's developed the capacity for intuitive awareness of hukam, and therefore lives in harmony with it. Hukam Pashana. On that note, until the next time, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.